So, gonna let this build up a little bit before we get started. Um, Today, I'm going to talk about my journey with Ancestry.com. I'm streaming live on two devices. So, if you see me looking back and forth from side to side, um, that's the reason why. I'm going to talk to you today about my journey with Ancestry.com. I know a lot of people see Ancestry.com. I know a lot of people see the commercials all the time. And when I first got started with it, I wasn't any different than you guys. So I'm going to go back to when I first started, and then I'm going to catch you up to how it affected me and today. My lip gloss is stuck to my lip. So I have my parents, I have several sisters and brothers, but I was the only one that had a different father. So going back, let's see, I've been on Ancestry.com, I want to say probably around like 2003, maybe, around that time. So, I know that in America, a lot of us are always searching for our family. And a lot of people feel like they don't have hope, whether they might be kids of adoption, whether they might have somehow or another been misplaced or just really never knew who their family was. So what I wanted to do was, as a kid, I struggled with, I knew who, my father was, but I just always had this feeling like, yeah, I fit in, but I don't fit in. It's like, for me, it was always a feeling of, kind of feeling like you just want to know, you just want to know, where did I get this from? Where did I get that from? And I think a lot of times, a lot of kids today struggle with that. Where did this come from? Back in the day, a lot of times our parents are just like they are now. Parents are now. You never think that what you're doing today as a younger person is going to really affect anybody but you. But that's kind of a selfish way of thinking about things because it affects more than just you. It affects generations and generations of people. So, growing up, I always had this feeling of, I just want to know, because sometimes your parents don't want to tell you stuff. And I know a lot of you have questions that your parents don't want to answer. Some of them are really embarrassed. They were out in the streets, and a lot of times they don't know. Mine did know, but she just didn't really want to talk about it. So for me, I always grew up feeling like that's not fair to me. I understand when we're out here in the streets and we're dating and we meet people and it's not the perfect situation or scenario, but things happen because nobody is perfect. But those things, those situations really do affect people's lives, and it affects lives for generations. And, back in the day, they had terminology called, there was a Rolling Stone, or, that song, wherever he wrote, Lady's Hat Was His Home. For me, that was never a funny situation. It was nothing humorous about it because wherever those stones rolled, there were children that were left. And a lot of these children had questions and things, and they weren't able to get the answers because I guess now parents are, now you're older and you're embarrassed. When you were young and you was just having your fun, you weren't embarrassed, but now you're embarrassed to say, this happened, that happened, it didn't happen, or whatever. Well, for all of you out there who have questions and you feel like your parents are not answering, or you might be a child of adoption, or, you just don't know. You don't know who or what or whatever. Ancestry.com has really, really made some leaps and bounds in technology. So I wanted to bring you guys to why I was doing this. Because, a lot of y'all see us out here and you see people or, real famous people, or just a person like myself that's, just a little tiny bit, have a little notoriety, but we're no different than you. And we have questions. And a lot of times, like back in the day, they didn't take pictures, or because they didn't, cameras were like really, really expensive. And so people didn't have money to take pictures. You might have had like 1 or 2 pictures around the house or whatever. And if somebody stole it, that was it. So you might never know who your great, great, great grandmother, what she looks like. And one thing that I can say as far as African-American families, from what I have seen, and remember, I'm only speaking from what I have seen. A lot of times we don't know our heritage. A lot of that has been taken away from us early on, but now there is a way for you to find out your heritage. And this is what brought me to you tonight. Tonight, I had a moment that I never thought that I would have experienced, but I experienced this due to Ancestry.com. A couple of weeks ago, I say about 3 weeks ago, I had another moment that I never would have thought in a million years that I would have had, but I had it because of Ancestry.com. So now I'm going to take you back to the beginning and then bring you back up to today. So I was curious, like I said, to know about my family heritage. Growing up, my grandmother always told me that her family was, as all African-American families say, we all say that we're Indian. That's the big thing. So she always told me that one half of my family, one of her parents was Cherokee, and the other one was Blackfoot Indian. So I went on a crusade looking for Blackfoot Indians. And because who I am a researcher. I go in depth with everything that I do. So I started researching Blackfoot Indians, Cherokee Indians. I looked everywhere to find all information. I literally took my family and we went to they had like an Indian convention, and I really enjoyed it because with this convention, I was able to go and I tried bison for the first time, and they did tribal dancing and everything because I wanted to know that side of my heritage, because I knew a lot about at least I thought I knew a lot about the African-American side, but I really didn't know what I knew. So I decided, you know what, bump this. I'm going to sign up for Ancestry.com. And I think when I first signed up, it might have been like $11 a month or $12, something like that. And they gave you a free trial. I think it was like a 2-week free trial. But that free trial was like amazing to me. So this was probably like 2002, I want to say. So what I did was I signed up for the free trial. And I think you might have had to put your debit card on there. Don't worry. They're not going to rip you off. It's okay. So I signed up. So When you sign up, it opens up all of these records that you cannot just normally find. Basically, all you need to have is know your name, birth date, date of birth. And if you have an idea of your mother's and father's name, birth date, where they were born, the city and the state. A lot of this information, if you get your birth certificate, a lot of this information is on there. It's a whole bunch of information on those birth certificates. You can tell, oh my God, my mama wasn't even married and I thought that she was. Or my mom said that she was this age and she really wasn't. And my dad, he was, all of that type thing. You can find all that out on your birth certificate. You just have to read. So I knew all my information. I went on ancestry.com, signed up. You just have to have an email address. And I did the 2-week trial. Now, at this time, they weren't doing the DNA portion of it. This was just pulling records. They were pulling records from the census. They were pulling records from death records, like when people die. They pull like telephone numbers and all different things for addresses and all of that. Well, a lot of people lie on the census. I didn't know that. That's what Jay Jackson told me. A lot of people he has heard have lied on the census, and I didn't understand it. And I had to explain to him that it's very important that you tell the truth on the census. The people that work for the census are not people that are coming to get in your business, or like people who might have Section 8. Someone told me that you put down that all these people live in your house and you're only supposed to have this amount of people. It's not for that. They're different entities. One doesn't have anything to do with it. It's not going to cross over into those, like those two systems are not going to cross into each other. The census is what will help you find your family, believe it or not. And it's probably going to help your family years and years, hundreds of years from now, to be able to find your family. So what I did was I put in who my mom was, my dad, who their mother was and father. And a lot of times, that's all the information I had. On my grandmother's side, I knew a lot of information, more information. So let's speed you up a few years. Put all of this information in. My grandmother had always told me a story about her older brother. And her older brother, they never knew that he had kids or that he was ever married. I never met him. He had already died before I was born. But my mom and my aunts, they never knew, and they knew him. They never knew that he had kids or was ever married. And this goes to prove to you how a lot of times knowledge is not just about you. Knowledge is about how you can help someone else too, because your story and your journey can always help someone else. So my grandmother told me a story about her brother, but he used to, back then they didn't have cars, so they had to walk everywhere they went. So they would walk from town to town and get work. And I guess when they would make money and stuff, they would come bring it back to their families. So her older brother bought her a baby doll, and she was so proud of this baby doll because they didn't have much. Well, her sister that was like a year older than her bit the nose off the doll and poked the doll down in the flour barrel. And she was talking about how upset she was and how hurt because her brother bought her this beautiful baby doll. When I tell you people, Ancestry.com helped me find this uncle's great grandchildren or grandchildren. And Now I'm going to go backwards again and tell you how. So I signed up back and I did the ancestry.com. So when you sign up and you put all this information in, it'll start giving you hints, even while you're on the free trial. So all of a sudden, like I might put my mom's name in. My mom's name is Anna. So when I put in who her sisters and brothers were, and around the time that they was born, even if I don't know the month or the year, if I just know one thing, I can put that in. And then all of a sudden, Ancestry.com starts throwing these little green leaves on it, on that person's name. That means that they have a hint. And when you get the hint, what you're supposed to do is open it up. And they're supposed to, when the hint comes over, you open up the little leaf, and the leaf will say, well, we found somebody that we think that might be related to you, but it's your job to verify with the information that you know and cross-reference it to see if this is really your family member. For example, I knew, well, my mom was born in Millen, Georgia. So back then, my mother's maiden name was Anna Thomas. So what would happen is it would be Anna Thomas, like it might be 15, 20 Anna Thomas that will pop up. So now I have to use common sense and kind of sort and filter out everything. So now what I'll do is I take the information I know. I know my mother wasn't born in Washington, D.C., so I would ignore that hint. I know my mother was never, in California in 1962. I can ignore that hint. And you just ignore all the hints until you get to a hint that makes sense to you. So now if it says, oh, my mother lived in Georgia. Okay, so now these start to make more sense. So then it might say, oh, this one lived in Sylvania, Georgia. Now I know that my mom used to live back in Sylvania, Georgia, all places like that. So I'm like, okay, yeah, that could have been them. So now what I do is I reference that against the census. So for example, the census is only taken every 10 years. So say like if a child, if it's better if you use it with the time. Yes, grandma's sister. Yes. Mm-hmm. So if say for instance, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm going back and forth because I'm also on YouTube over here too, and I'm on Facebook Live. Because I feel like this information, needs to get out here, and it could just make a person feel so much better. So you reference the two back and forth with each other, and the census. So if a child in, let's say 1920, I'm just using this for example, if a child was 10 years old in 1920, and the census only comes out every 10 years, the next census is going to be 1920. So that 10-year-old child, when I look for that name, by 1920, this child is probably an adult now, because back then they got married real early. So by the age of 20, that person was probably in their own household, married with their own children. So that's what I would start doing. So now I start I saw this child, who their sisters and brothers were in the house, because on the census, it asks you, who's the head of household? How are you related to the head of household? People, this information is valuable. Please don't lie on your census. Make sure you give the correct information. So now it might say, like my grandmama, my grandmother and grandfather might have been in the house, and then you'll see the older kids, and then you'll see the smaller kids. So if this kid here was 2 on this census, by 1920, that kid will be 12. And that's how you do it. And then you keep going. Okay, well, the next census will be 1930. You add 10 years to that. So now that child is now 22. So now this child, I should be looking for this child in their own household. So that's how you use the census. You take your calculator and you say, oh, if they were 12 in 1920, and then you subtract 1920, and you subtract 12 from that, that will give you the year that person was born. So if you get what I'm saying. So like, for instance, if it's the child is 10 years old, they telling you it's 1920 and this child was 10 years old. That means that child was probably born in 1910. So now what you want to do is you start looking for that child's name and anything that you can find in a household with 1910, birth date around 1910. So now you reference this child was born in 1910. This was their mother. They lived in Georgia. They lived in this county. And that's how you start compiling your information. And Ancestry.com, they're going to give you all these hints. In the first 2 weeks that you have it, you're going to be able to get to all these census and military war records. And I found my grandfather's where he was in the military. You can find where they were in World War I. You can trace this. I've traced stuff back all the way up to the 1800s, just about, with different things, with the census, exactly. So you keep tracing. So I kept tracing and tracing and tracing. A lot of times it's like a puzzle. You'll work on it over here for a bit, and it keeps spreading out like a crack in a windshield. So each person that you add, say like for me, I'm married to Jay Jackson. So our kids, you put their name in. So now it's going to spread out because it's going to ask, well, who is Jay Jackson's mother and father? And then I've got on my side, I have my mother and father. So it's going to spread and go out like a crack like a spider web, crack in a windshield. And so you just keep spreading it out like that until you're able to, and this all is happening during these 2 weeks. So the more information, it's like a computer. The more information you feed into it, the more results that you're going to get back. And so you need to do all of this before you take your DNA test. Before. Right now, anyway, the DNA test is $59.99. Which when I did mine, it was $100. And I think when we did Jay Jackson, his was like $75. So it's on a discount right now. But so it just keeps spreading out. Now it goes. So it's giving me all these hints. So I'm constantly, it's just like you're hitting the little green leaf. And it's saying, oh, well, did she ever live in Brooklyn, New York? So did she ever live here? Did she ever live there? Now, if you know this information, I'm like, oh, yeah, she did. She lived in. So this was probably my mama in 1963 or 64. So you just keep clicking on this information. And every day it's going to give you more and more and more. The problem is you have to be very careful with what you select. You also have to be very careful with who you let add information into your family tree. So, for example, there are stepkids. You can love them and they can be your everything. Adopted kids, you can love them. They can be your everything, but they are not your biological DNA. And that's what this tree is supposed to pick, your biological DNA. Now, there is area in there where you can put, because it'll ask you, fill out this, where you the parent, what's the birthplace, what's the death date all of that kind of stuff. Now, Ancestry.com, when it comes to people that are living, they don't give you a whole bunch of information. They'll give you little stuff like, could they, did they live here? Were they born there? Could they have gone to this place or that place? Because they want to protect people and their identity, I guess identity fraud and theft. But when a person is deceased, you get more information. So like if you know your grandparent died or whatever, it'll give you all the information. It'll give you their social security number. It'll give you their death certificate. It'll give you, it's just like a lot of different things that it'll give you. So it'll keep sending you like hints. So you might get a hint will say, oh, this death certificate, this person died so and so and so on. Sometimes the dates are a little bit off. It might be they died in 1963 and you know that they died in 1964. Excuse me, let me get a sip of this water right here. Oh, okay. So, you know they died in 1960. So, but everything else checks out. The name is right with the city that they lived in, the state, the county, all of that kind of stuff. So you know that so to keep, and it tells you, do you want to add this to your tree? Yes or no? You get the option to add it to the tree, or it'll tell you, well, I'm not sure. This person might be related to me, but I'm not exactly sure. So you can hit maybe, and it takes all the things that you're saying maybe, and they put it over to the side in a file. Okay. And then the information that you say, oh yeah, this is definitely my family. Because if I look in here, it'll ask you to say, we found this census and your person's name is on there. What you got to do is you got to look at the census, open it up and say, oh yeah, that is my mama. That's my auntie, this, my uncle, that. Okay. Yeah, I can add this to my tree. So you just add it on, keep adding it on. Sooner or later, it's going to branch out and you're going to keep going and going and going and going. And you're going to get all these hints. Then you're going to start getting hints for the people that you're married to, because it connects you, because through your children that you have together, now your spouse's DNA is going to connect. I mean, not DNA, their ancestry is going to connect. So you keep doing that. Now, the 2 weeks is up. Everything comes to a halt. You don't lose your information. The information is still there. You can look at the information, but all of a sudden now, guess what? You can't get into the census. Now, you could Google 1920 census. You can Google it because these are, what do they call it? Public record. So you can get that information that way, but it's not going to be as easy as it was when it was on Ancestry.com, because I think at one time they used to use the Mormons, Latter-day Saints or something like that. They keep like very good records. Now, I don't know how they get all of these records, but they have a lot of the census and all of that kind of thing. So, and there's also a place if you're in Georgia, you can go to Morrow, Georgia. I think it's Morrow, somewhere down towards, it's a little bit past the airport. You can go down there and you can go into the genealogy database, but trust me, I've been there too. It's not easy. I've been to the courthouse. It's not easy. So to me, it made more sense to go spend that $16 a month. I would eat that up in a hamburger or two. So why not invest that little bit of money in my future? So at the end of that, your 2-week trial is up. Now you got to decide what you're going to do. Now you don't want to have to try to go and find all this information on your own because it's hard. We went to, I live in Georgia. We went to South Georgia. We went to the courthouse. That was a disaster. You would not think that, like for instance, my great grandfather's name was Handy, Handy, like the handyman, Handy Ellison. Now, how many people would think that Handy was a very common name back then? So you would think, oh man, that's gonna be so simple. I'll be able to find that. No, man. Let me tell you something. We went to the courthouse. Everybody's last name was Ellison. Because, a lot of times back in the day, your last name is really not your real last name, probably. You took on the last name of whoever your slave owner was. So it would be like everybody that was out there would have that same last name or whatever. So then I was like, okay, can't be that many Handys. Handy? Never heard anybody Handy. Everybody's name was Handy. Everybody. So then I found out borders, like what we think are states ending borders. Like for instance, in a city called Sylvania, Georgia. That's like right close to the border of Georgia where South Carolina and Georgia crosses over. Well, what we didn't know was we knew that a part of our family was known to have come from South Carolina. Well, we didn't know that the border had been moved over time. And so what's now classified as Georgia at one point in time was like a border of South Carolina. So where these people, it changed. Just like if you live right at the border of Alabama and Georgia, now you might think it's Alabama and Georgia. I mean, you might think that it's Georgia. Maybe 100, 200 years from now, that might be classified as Alabama. To you, it's the same, but as far as the information, it's different. So you'll be able to tell all of that information on the census. So, like I said, the free trial is up now. You are looking everywhere. So what I did was I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead on and I'm going to pay for this thing. So I literally have been paying for the Ancestry.com ever since probably about 2002, like I said. And you really don't miss the money. Sometimes it's just principle. Oh, man, I'm not going to look that up. But this thing is constantly sending you clues, even when you're not actively looking. So back to how I find my family. So now I got y'all caught up on how to use Ancestry.com because that's kind of important. So I decided first I found one of my uncles. I knew what his name was. My cousin told me what his name was. His name wasn't a real common name, I didn't feel. So what I did, I put his name in Ancestry.com. And bing, here comes, it pops up. We have a hint. So I knew that my uncle was a doctor. And so I was like, okay, let me see what I can find. I put it in. And one thing about Ancestry.com, it allows you can email through the Ancestry.com so that a person doesn't have your own personal information unless you want to give it to them. So this is about 5 years ago, maybe. I emailed my uncle and I said, hi, I am your brother's child. I'd like to try to get to talk to you and know you. He emailed me back. It took a while because I don't check, because like they might send it to your Gmail. So you might email them through the app. And then what happens is then they send it back through your Gmail. So he emailed me back and he was like, oh, hi, this is your uncle. And, and I'm telling him how it says that I'm related to him, how I know that I'm related to him. But at this point in time, like I said, I hadn't done the DNA. So I'm just going by what, my family's always told me and all like that. So I knew he was my uncle. So I located my grandmother and some of my aunts through the census. Now, this was on my biological father's mother's side. I located them. And when I found them, I started, because, if it's in a small town, they're only going to, it's on the telephone book is only about 3 pages wide. Thick. So you can find them. So what I did was I Googled it and I found like some of my cousins, my aunts and stuff. And I called them and they was like, oh, yeah, we know who you are, Nannette. We haven't seen you since you was a really, really little baby and all of this kind of stuff. So what I did was they told me I had a cousin here in Atlanta and I connected with my cousin. And so she was like, oh, yeah, yes, your grandmother is still alive and all like that. I was able to go and meet with my grandmother and spend time with her. And my older 2 daughters were able to spend time with my grandmother before she passed. We had time to laugh, and I owe that to Ancestry.com. I forgot about that, but I did. I owed that to Ancestry.com because I wouldn't have found them if I hadn't have, to find the names and stuff, if I hadn't have looked up the census and stuff. Excuse me. So I found my grandmother on, like I said, my father's mother. Then I was trying to find my father's side of the family. So I was looking and I found his information, but I didn't have a lot of information about him. No one had told me. So I was like, you know what? I can only go here and there. My cousin gave me a name of one of his brothers, which was the one that was the doctor. And I put that information, and then he gave me information about what his sister's name was, and she didn't have a common name, and I plugged that information in. So we emailed back and forth a little bit, me and my uncle. I said I would love to call you. I spoke with him on the phone, but you still kind of have this, I don't know, because these, people are strangers. So I don't want to get all into it with people like that. I just want to know for sure. So, you have to proceed with caution, because just because, everybody is your family or whatever, sometimes things are not what they seem. So you just need to take time to see. So by then I decided, okay, I'm going to do this DNA test. And the only reason I did the DNA test, really and truthfully, is because we had a cousin and she was like 106. And we wanted her to take the DNA test. And when she took because she was so old, elderly, when she tried to take the test, because with the DNA test, they send you a little tube, you crack it open, it got this little liquid stuff. No, you spit down in the tube, and you have to spit up to a certain level in the tube. And then you put the top back on it and shake it up or something, and it breaks it, and it mixes this blue solution with it. And then you write all your information on the envelope and everything. And then you tell them whether or not you would like to share your information. Do you want to keep it private, or, anything like that? Can they use it like to check different DNA and all kind of stuff? So I was like, you know what? I want to know everything that I can, because I'm going to see if this is accurate or whatever. So because my cousin couldn't do the test, and we had all chipped in to get a GoFundMe to go buy this test, because all my cousins and family members, because she was the oldest person. So when it comes to, it's always best if you can to do it with a male or with an older person. So she couldn't do the test. So my cousins in South Georgia sent the test back to me. And I was like, shoot, well, we can't let this get wasted. I'm just going to do the test. So I went ahead, did the test, sent it off. It took about 2 or 3 weeks to come back. And when it came back, it had like a graph, like a pie. And the pie told you like where your family and whatever throughout the world was from. So the test was set. The test, you get it to link with your DNA, with your ancestry information that you put in, because they ask you, do you want me to link this information to your family tree? You need to say yes. When we linked it to the family tree, the pie, you can open it up, and it said I had it was like I was African and like white, Caucasian, from like England, Scotland, England, or something like that. So I started questioning the DNA test, because I was like, wait a minute. On both sides, on my father's side, I know I have Native American. I had talked to my uncle by this time. So he had given me very detailed information about like his father and stuff, and Native Americans, and him seeing them in tribal, outfits and all that kind of stuff. And I know my grandmother had always grown up telling me that her grandparents, one was Cherokee and one was Blackfoot Indian. So, and then, like her features look like it, the slanted eyes, the high cheekbones, the, orangish looking skin like mine, that type of thing. So I was like, hold up. I thought the DNA test had done something wrong, because I was like, clearly y'all are missing my Native American. So, I got really upset, because I thought they was lying to me. I was like, y'all up here bamboozling and hoodwinking people. And I was like, I'm not here for it. So I just kind of shut my stuff down. I ain't do nothing. So fast forward like a year. Like I told you at the beginning of this video, and I know this is long, but this is important and it's needed. DNA is there are constant developments in it. So my sister bought my mother a DNA test. So my mom did her DNA test and put in there that it's okay to share the information. And lo and behold, when my mother's DNA test come back a year later, hers is taken, it's a newer test. It says that she has African, Caucasian, and Native American. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. How she got Native American and she my mama, but I ain't got none in me, because that's what y'all told me. Y'all don't know. I literally called Ancestry.com and told them that y'all did something wrong with my test, and y'all need to give me my money back, or y'all need to give me another test, because y'all told me I don't have no Native American in me, and that is incorrect. So they was like, we ain't giving you no new test. They was like, nah, the DNA, basically kind of like what Maury said, the DNA don't lie. So I was like, nope, something ain't right. So then when my mother did her test and it said the DNA, that it was Native American, then I went back now, because like I told you, the website is constantly updating. So now I go back into my DNA results, because they link your results to your tree. Now it says, oh, she has Native American in there. So it says that I have Senegal. It says Congo. It says Scotland, Wales. It says because it's like the percentages. So like most of my percentages is African. It's like I at first it had told me that I had like Nigerian, but then it went back because it keeps refiltering like, okay, wait a minute. Maybe you don't have this, you got this. So I still wasn't really taking it as serious as I should have been taking it. So my cousin on my father's niece, she took her test and she did her thing to share the DNA. What it did was it linked up because she's taken hers like a year later than my mother had taken hers. And the DNA said, it sent her an email saying, we found one of your relatives. This relative is either a first or a second cousin, because that's how good it is now. So when I looked at mine and I saw it, I was like, okay, it says I'm a first or second cousin. And remember that uncle that I told you that I had emailed before? He did his DNA test sometime and shared it. And it told me that he was related to me like first or second generation, meaning he was like an uncle or something like that. So his DNA linked him to me, which proves that his brother is my father, his sister is my aunt, and then my cousin's DNA proves that my father is her uncle, and her grandmother was my grandmother. So that DNA linked us all together, even if we had not known each other. It linked us all together. And then I'm going to explain that to you too in a moment. So, my cousin, the one that I told you about where I said my grandmother, she had this older brother. They didn't even know he had kids. And her sister bit the nose off the doll and put it in the flour. Well, they had Ancestry.com has this thing that they're trying out now, and it's called beta DNA. That's BETA, I think it is, DNA. And so they sent me this thing and they said, we're only releasing this out right now to only a few select people. But once we get the kinks out of it, or we determine, we want you to tell us how do you think it is and how it's working. Well, when I press that, it opens up. You know how like when you had a globe and they unfold the globe, it opens that up, the map like that. And on that map, it has locations of people. So when you join Ancestry.com, you could put a picture of yourself up for your profile. And so what it is you see all these dots all over the map and you spread it out and you can see the person's profile picture. And it's telling you where it has like a, let's say somebody's in South Carolina, somebody might be in Louisiana, somebody might be in Florida, and it's a dot like how you have on your phone when you have your locator on, but it's just a dot saying that this person lives in this state, and your DNA is you share DNA with this person. And when you click on that button, the button opens up and it tells you how many chromosomes and I forgot what you call the other ones, the chromosomes and all of that, how many strands you share. So I had some people I shared like 500 strands. And then I had some people that was like probably like maybe my first cousin and I think one of my first cousins, I shared like 300 strands of something, chromosomes or something. And then that's how they're able to tell whether this is probably your mother. So, like for instance, people who have been put up for adoption, you're able to tell by the DNA if that's your mother or if that's your father, because they'll tell you this person is probably a parent or a child relationship. So I opened up the map and I was looking at it and I was like, oh my God, it was probably about 50 or 60 people on there. But you have to think, everybody doesn't share their DNA when they do it. They make their page private, and which is not good, because if you're joining this in order to find out who your family is, you got to open it up. You can't be that private that you don't want anybody to see it, because you're never going to get anywhere. So when I started hitting the buttons, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to find all these people? So when you open it up, it'll tell you, it's one column that says you share DNA with all of these people. And then it says, who do you have in common? And so what I would do is I would look and I would say, okay, these people I share in common with my uncle who took the test. These people I have in common with my mother. These people I have in common with my cousin. So I was able to, and so when I would open it up, I would look like my grandmother's surname was Ellison. So I would open it up and I would say, oh, since women, you get married and your last name change. But when you have sons, the last name doesn't change. So I would go through and I'd be like, oh, okay, this is an Ellison. This is an Ellison. Okay, so they're related to me on my grandmother's side because this is an Ellison. And then it would tell me, this person is probably you and this person are probably fourth cousins or sixth cousin. So like if you're a fourth cousin, it'll say on the side, you probably share great grandparents. So that would be not your grandparents, not your grandparents' grandparent. I mean, not your grandparents, not your great grandparents, but like the great grandparent after that. So now you know that, okay, these were probably my mom's aunts or some junk like my mom's grandmother's grandmother, like that. So then you start looking at the names and you can say, oh, this person right here, they're probably related to me on my grandfather's side. So what I did is I started emailing people. Well, I emailed one of the ladies. It says she lived in Florida. But when she called me, she had a Georgia number. So I sent the email and I said, Ancestry.com says that I'm related to you on my grandmother's side. And I said, please contact me so that we can, check our DNA trees and see how we're related. Well, one of them called me and she ended up, her father never knew his father. His mother had a nervous breakdown when he and his brother were 2 and 4 years old. So, at 2 and 4, you don't really have a lot of memory. So what happened is their mother's mother took them and raised them because the daughter had a nervous breakdown and she wasn't able to take care of the kids. So she moved them from Georgia to Florida. So her father grew up not knowing anything about his father or not knowing anything about his father's side of the family. When he died, they had a small family on that, it was just the uncle, the 2-year-old and the 4-year, it was just them and their kids. That's all they knew. But it made me feel so very good to be able to share with her that your grandfather and my grandmother, wait, was it her grandfather? Yeah, her grandfather and my grandmother were sisters and brothers. That goes to show you how much, how far it just doesn't take long for families to grow apart and you not know. So when she found out that, so it's like her father and my mother were first cousins. And because they didn't have any knowledge of their background, the DNA was all that they had. And because I was this little kid that sat down and listened to stories when my grandmother used to talk and tell stories about their childhood and junk, because we didn't have all these, we had TVs and junk, but we didn't have all of this technology and junk. So story time was fun. And because sometimes people have a tendency to tell you the same stories over and over again, you're able to regurgitate that information to someone else. So with this cousin, she's thirsty to hear about her side of her family because she had that same feeling that I had, where you don't know anything and you just open, you just want to fill that hole up. So I told her the story that my grandmother told me about where her brother where her sister bit the nose off the doll that that her grandfather had given her. I told her that I, as a kid, because let me tell you something, my grandmother raised me half my life. So every Mother's Day and all that kind of stuff, we had to go to the church. And when you go to the church, they make you go clean off the grave and you got to take the old dead flowers off and put the new flowers on. So we always had to put all of this stuff on the graves. So a lot of the spots didn't have headstones, but I know where her grandfather's grave is. So I can show her, or at least the what'd you say, vicinity of where it is. I can show her that. I know the church where he was I know the church where he was buried. He was buried next to his mom's grave, and that didn't have a headstone either. Shout out to Sandhill Baptist Church in Millen, Georgia. But she wants to take a trip down there so that she can get this information. So because I listened, because I did my DNA, because I did my research, I was able to help her. And she was telling me, she was like, I was telling her, we have a lot of cousins and uncles and stuff that lived to be over 100. And she was like, wow, that's so amazing to hear, because on her mother's side, the lifespan is very short. So DNA doesn't just help you with Maury, like, oh, he is not the father, or, oh, yes, he is Maury. It doesn't just help with that. It helps you to know your DNA. I knew when I had my little boy, because I was what they call advanced maternal, because I knew that my grandfather had always told me stories about his mom looking like she was white, or she was half white or something, that I knew when I did my genetics and my DNA that DNA would affect my son, because they said it put him at risk for having cystic fibrosis, which is something typically that African Americans don't get. But because I have, and I asked the lady, I was like, so you mean to tell me, because I have that DNA from way back then, that can affect my child now? And they were like, yes, it can. So it's very important for you to know your history and to know your DNA. And like tonight, going back to tonight, and I'm about to end this video, I went and me and my kids went and had Christmas dinner with my aunt and my uncle and their family that I found on ancestry.com. And it was amazing. They were very, very upstanding and good people, and it was just a beautiful situation, and a lot of time it felt very surreal for me, because when I started this journey looking, I never thought I would have found it. And also on ancestry.com, it gives you a box that you can check that if you're good at this, do you mind helping other people? And I checked that box. I don't mind helping other people. I feel that it's very, very important for us to do this, and just, we can't be selfish. We can blame our parents. I have some other brothers and sisters that I've found, or that they found me, and we're trying to bridge the gap, because we don't want our kids marrying your kids and your cousins and stuff. Like my brother said, although it's a very big world, it's a very small world too. And for me to have found this family, and I'm still on the search, I'm still looking. My husband, Jay Jackson, everything that he thought about his family was wrong. He thought that his family was all from, I can't say it was wrong, but a lot of the things that he thought, we've traced his family, and his family really took care in documenting. His family goes back to a city it's called Livingston, Virginia. It's a Nelson County in Virginia. We found out information that it's close to the Walton Mountain. Like if you used to watch the Waltons back in the day. All this information he didn't know. He was from Baltimore. And a lot of times people didn't talk about stuff. It was like the kids don't ask questions and this, that. Now you don't have to do that. Now you can just take your DNA test and it's going to tell the truth and shame the devil. His town, I found more information on his family than I did mine, and he didn't know anything really. We traced his family all the way back to the town that they originally, when slavery ended, a lot of people didn't know for like a long time after that slavery was over, because they didn't have telephones, they didn't have radios and all this kind of stuff. So it was kind of word of mouth. So that a lot of them didn't know that they was free. And so what happened is a lot of his family, when they did find out they were free, they was like, okay, this today was no different than yesterday. So they just stayed right in that same town, and their records are immaculate. So that just goes to show you how you can really find out a lot of information about yourself if you just take the time to fill this information out. And it's like a puzzle. I have my kids and my grandkids looking and telling them stories, and how your story can help someone else, because we've become a country and a nation of only thinking about ourselves. And we can't do that. We have to think about, like how they always tell you, you can't just think about today. You got to think about tomorrow. You really do. And like I said, I just wanted to share with you guys how Ancestry.com has helped me. You guys can reach out to me if you need help or assistance. I am not going to say help. You're going to have to do it yourself. But I will help you and guide you, whatever it is. My email is Nannette, thetruthhurts1@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook at Nannette Jackson. Instagram is Nannette The Truth Hurts. And I don't mind, ask me a question, because I know it's a lot of you out there that just want to know who you are. And it's not, it's nothing wrong with that, because how were you going to ever know where you're going when you don't know who you are and where you've been? That's why a lot of these kids now are so lost. It's because we don't teach them nothing. We don't talk to them, or anything. But my kids are telling me it's family time, it's dinner time, so I gotta go. But on YouTube, go down, subscribe, and I will tell you guys and keep you guys informed. I hope you enjoyed this video. This was very sentimental to me. It's very private, but sentimental. So we had dinner with my family, my ancestry.com family, and I'm very excited and ecstatic about getting to know them. They are some amazing people. So you don't know who you might have out there. The people who might be in your life right now might be good, but you might have some more amazing people. You know, you can never have too much love. And if they're not good, at least you know. At least you had the opportunity to find out, you know. Be cautious. Don't just take everything, because all family ain't good family. But I mean, I'm quite sure that should be able to gauge that by, you know, just go slow. You know, one thing about me, I'm not fake. So I have to, you know, I'm not like one of these people where you just fall in love with everything right away. You just all in. No, I'm a scooter. I gotta do a little bit by little bit. But my kids are telling me that I need to go. For any of you who missed this video, go back over it and look and see what I'm talking about, because you're going to see how ancestry.com can really help you find out who you are. So this is Nannette, The Truth Hurts. My hashtag, my new thing now is The Truth Hurts. So just get your Band-Aid, put it on it, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you guys for tuning in, and bye-bye until the next time. That's it. So subscribe.